Humphrey Bogart's screen presence was magnetic, drawing audiences into tales of crime, betrayal, and redemption. From the cool cynicism of Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon to the self-sacrificing nobility of Rick Blaine in Casablanca, he became the quintessential flawed hero. But while Bogart embodied strength and integrity on screen, his personal life was far more tumultuous, a story of ambition, rebellion, and inner conflict. Behind the iconic tough guy image was a man grappling with his own demons. This story seeks to unravel the enigma of Humphrey Bogart, delving into the shadowy corners of his life that shaped the man behind the myth. From his rocky early years in New York to his battles with the Hollywood machine, we'll explore the personal and professional struggles that defined him. Through this lens, we'll come to see how Bogart's flaws were inseparable from his greatness. His personal struggles didn't just mirror the themes of the characters he portrayed, they fueled his performances, giving them a timeless authenticity. By examining the shadows that followed him throughout his life, we uncover the humanity that made him more than just a Hollywood star. So, light a cigarette, dim the lights, and step into the smoky, chiaroscuro world of Humphrey Bogart. The man who owned the silver screen was more complex, more tormented, and far more fascinating than any role he ever played. Humphrey DeForest Bogart was born on December 25, 1899, into a world of privilege and dysfunction. Raised in the upscale neighborhood of Manhattan's Upper West Side, Bogart's early life seemed charmed on the surface. His father, Belmont DeForest Bogart, was a respected heart surgeon, and his mother, Maud Humphrey, was a successful illustrator and suffragette whose work appeared on countless magazine covers. Yet beneath this veneer of affluence lay a family dynamic fraught with tension, distance, and unspoken resentments that would shape the man Bogart would become. The Bogart household was a cold and isolating environment. Belmont, known as Doc, was a man whose professional ambitions masked a tragic flaw: his addiction to morphine. Struggling with chronic pain and an inability to live up to his own lofty expectations, he descended into dependence on the drug, leaving an impression of weakness and failure on his young son. Bogart's father was distant and often irritable, a man of high intelligence but low emotional availability. Humphrey, caught between admiration and resentment, saw firsthand the fragility behind his father's professional facade. His mother, Maud, was no less complicated. A fiercely independent woman, she prioritized her career over maternal affection. By some accounts, Maud treated young Humphrey as more of an accessory to her work than as a child. She famously used him as a model for baby advertisements, including one for Mellon's baby food. Bogart would later reflect bitterly on this experience, describing himself as little more than a painted baby in her eyes. Maud's emotional detachment and sharp tongue left Bogart with a deep well of insecurity that he buried under a veneer of toughness. Together, his parents' strained marriage and self-absorbed pursuits created an environment where love and validation were in short supply. Bogart's childhood was marked by a sense of neglect, a lesson in self-reliance that would later inform the detached, world-weary characters he portrayed on screen. The tension between his privileged upbringing and the emotional vacuum at its core planted the seeds of Bogart's darker persona, one defined by a skepticism of authority and a reluctance to show vulnerability. Seeking an escape from his fractured home life, Bogart found a sense of purpose, albeit briefly, in the Navy. Enlisting during World War I at just 18 years old, he served aboard the USS Leviathan, a troop transport ship. The Navy provided Bogart with structure, discipline, and camaraderie, but it also exposed him to the harsh realities of war. It was during this time that Bogart reportedly acquired the scar that became one of his most distinctive features. Accounts differ as to how it happened. Some say it was the result of shrapnel during a skirmish, while others claim it was the aftermath of a barroom brawl or even a disciplinary incident with a commanding officer. Regardless of the cause, the scar shaped his iconic tough guy image, giving his face the rugged, lived-in quality that would later define his screen persona. The Navy also deepened Bogart's natural cynicism. Witnessing the bureaucracy and inefficiencies of military life, he developed a disdain for authority figures, a sentiment that would persist throughout his career. After being honorably discharged in 1919, Bogart returned to civilian life with a sharper edge, carrying with him the lessons of independence and resilience that he had learned during his service. Upon his return, Bogart drifted aimlessly for a time, unsure of his place in the world. A family friend introduced him to the world of theater, and he took to acting with a mix of enthusiasm and uncertainty. His early career on the stage was far from glamorous, with Bogart taking on minor roles in small productions. His performances were often met with lukewarm reception, and critics were quick to dismiss him as unremarkable. By the late 1920s, Bogart had made his way to Hollywood, but the transition to film was anything but smooth. Typecast as a gangster due to his gruff demeanor and urban New York accent, he found himself relegated to a string of forgettable B-movies. Bogart grew increasingly frustrated with the superficiality of the roles he was offered, recognizing that Hollywood valued him more for his physical presence than for his talent. He bristled at the industry's rigid studio system, which prioritized conformity over individuality. Still, those early years taught Bogart the value of perseverance. He studied the craft with a quiet determination, learning to channel his frustrations into his performances. The very traits that held him back initially, his scarred face, his aloofness, his air of defiance, would eventually become the hallmarks of his stardom. Bogart's early life was a crucible that forged the qualities audiences would later see on screen. From his parents, he inherited a mistrust of authority and a reluctance to display vulnerability. From the Navy, he gained the discipline and fortitude to navigate the challenges of Hollywood. And from his early failures as an actor, he learned to embrace the rugged, anti-establishment persona that would set him apart in an industry obsessed with glamour. By the time Bogart began to make a name for himself in the 1930s, he was no longer the uncertain young man searching for his place in the world. He had become Humphrey Bogart, the embodiment of grit, resilience, and a certain darkness that hinted at deeper truths. His early struggles, far from holding him back, became the foundation of the legend he would become. Humphrey Bogart's rise to fame was not an overnight phenomenon. It was a slow burn, fueled by determination, an undeniable screen presence, and roles that seemed to draw from his own complex personality. By the early 1940s, Bogart had begun to transition from a typecast gangster in supporting roles to a leading man, defining an entirely new archetype of the Hollywood hero. His breakthrough roles in The Maltese Falcon, 1941, and Casablanca, 1942, solidified his place in cinematic history, cementing his reputation as an actor who could bring unparalleled depth to morally ambiguous characters. Bogart's turn as Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon was the first role that truly showcased his range. Directed by John Huston, the film marked a departure from the shallow, one-dimensional characters that had previously dominated Bogart's career. Spade was no ordinary detective. He was cynical, shrewd, and unflinchingly pragmatic. Bogart's portrayal added a layer of humanity to Spade, making him more than just a hard-boiled gumshoe. His sly grin and sharp retorts masked an undercurrent of vulnerability, hinting at a man shaped by betrayal and disillusionment. Critics praised the film's tight script and Huston's direction, but it was Bogart's performance that elevated it to legendary status. The following year, Bogart took on what would become his most iconic role, Rick Blaine, in Casablanca. Initially, studio executives doubted Bogart's ability to carry a romantic drama, as he had never played a role of such emotional complexity. However, Bogart delivered a performance that balanced Rick's tough exterior with a deeply buried sense of loss and longing. Whether delivering sharp quips at his cafe or sacrificing his own happiness for Ilsa's future, Bogart's portrayal resonated with audiences, especially in the wartime context of the 1940s. Rick Blaine became the blueprint for the anti-hero, flawed, haunted, but ultimately noble. The character's evolution over the course of the film mirrored Bogart's own journey, from a struggling actor fighting for recognition to a star who commanded the screen with subtlety and strength. Casablanca won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and though Bogart didn't win the Oscar for Best Actor, his performance solidified his status as one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. While Bogart excelled at playing stoic, heroic characters, his off-screen persona was far more complex. The toughness and moral integrity he displayed on screen often concealed a man who was deeply private and guarded. Unlike Rick Blaine or Sam Spade, Bogart wasn't always quick with a clever retort or a decisive action. He was introspective, occasionally insecure, and prone to moments of doubt. To many who knew him, Bogart's on-screen persona wasn't entirely an act. It was an amplification of certain aspects of his real personality. He shared his character's disdain for authority and adherence to personal codes of honor, but the vulnerability he brought to his roles came from a place of genuine experience. The emotional scars left by his upbringing, combined with the pressures of Hollywood, added layers to his performances that few of his peers could match. At the same time, Bogart was acutely aware of the image he had to project to maintain his stardom. Publicly, he leaned into his tough guy persona, often downplaying his moments of insecurity. This duality, his on-screen heroism and his private struggles, made him both relatable and enigmatic, allowing audiences to connect with him in ways they rarely could with other stars of his era. Bogart's relationships within Hollywood reflected his complex personality. He had a knack for forming deep bonds with those who shared his values and an equally pronounced tendency to clash with those he found insincere or overbearing. His collaborations with John Huston, for instance, became one of the defining partnerships of his career. Huston and Bogart first worked together on The Maltese Falcon, forging a creative and personal bond that would endure throughout Bogart's life. Huston, known for his rebellious streak and disdain for authority, was a kindred spirit. Together, they made some of Bogart's most celebrated films, including The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948, and Key Largo, 1948. Huston understood how to draw out the best in Bogart, pushing him to explore the emotional depths of his characters. Their relationship was marked by mutual respect, camaraderie, and a shared love of hard drinking. Bogart's friendships with his peers were equally legendary. He and Spencer Tracy, another Hollywood heavyweight, shared a deep camaraderie rooted in mutual respect and shared experiences in the film industry. Tracy appreciated Bogart's no-nonsense attitude and quick wit, while Bogart admired Tracy's raw talent. Their friendship, however, wasn't without its fiery moments, often exacerbated by alcohol-fueled arguments that occasionally spilled into public view. Ava Gardner, one of Bogart's close friends, often spoke of his fiercely loyal and protective nature. Gardner, who had her own struggles with Hollywood's demands, found a kindred spirit in Bogart. Their friendship was marked by nights of drinking, laughter, and unfiltered honesty. Yet even in his friendships, Bogart's darker tendencies sometimes emerged. He had a sharp tongue and an inclination toward heated debates, traits that occasionally alienated those around him. By the mid-1940s, Humphrey Bogart was no longer just an actor, he was a symbol. His rise to stardom was rooted in his ability to make the flawed, morally ambiguous hero relatable. Audiences saw in him a reflection of their own struggles and contradictions, a man who could balance strength with vulnerability, cynicism with hope. Bogart's relationships with his collaborators and peers played a significant role in shaping his career, providing him with the support and inspiration to push his craft to new heights. Yet, like the characters he portrayed, Bogart remained something of an enigma, a man defined as much by his shadows as by his light. Humphrey Bogart's on-screen persona often reflected a tough, self-reliant man with a sharp wit and an unshakable moral compass. Off-screen, however, Bogart's life was a tempest of personal struggles. His love of alcohol, turbulent marriages, and fiery temperament painted a complex picture of a man grappling with his demons. These struggles, while damaging in many ways, also informed his legendary performances and shaped his legacy as one of Hollywood's most compelling stars. Bogart's relationship with alcohol was infamous in Hollywood circles. He was rarely seen without a drink in hand, and his love for whiskey and gin became as much a part of his identity as his trench coat and fedora. While drinking was a social norm in the Hollywood of his time, Bogart's consumption went beyond casual indulgence. It was both a lifestyle and a coping mechanism. Anecdotes of Bogart's drunken escapades are the stuff of legend. He was known for his sharp tongue and quick wit, qualities that only became more pronounced after a few drinks. Friends and colleagues often recounted his ability to hold court at Hollywood parties, delivering cutting one-liners and engaging in spirited debates. Yet his drinking also had a darker side. On more than one occasion, it led to heated arguments, physical altercations, and public embarrassment. One particularly infamous episode occurred during a party hosted by director John Huston. Bogart, heavily intoxicated, got into a shouting match with actor Errol Flynn that nearly escalated into a brawl. In another instance, while filming The African Queen, 1951, Bogart's drinking caused tensions on set, though his professionalism usually ensured the work got done. For Bogart, alcohol seemed to serve as both an escape and a crutch. Many who knew him believed his drinking masked deeper insecurities, stemming from his troubled childhood and the pressures of maintaining his tough guy image. It's telling that Bogart rarely drank alone. His love for social drinking hinted at a need for connection, even as his behavior sometimes alienated those closest to him. Bogart's tumultuous personal life was epitomized by his relationships. His first 3 marriages were marked by conflict, infidelity, and a lack of stability, reflecting a pattern of emotional turbulence that mirrored his own inner struggles. Bogart's first wife, actress Helen Menken, was a strong-willed woman whose fiery temperament clashed with his own. Their marriage lasted less than a year, with both citing irreconcilable differences. His second marriage to actress Mary Phillips fared slightly better but ended in divorce after 4 years, largely due to Bogart's infidelity and their incompatible lifestyles. His third marriage, to actress Mayo Methot, was perhaps the most notorious. Dubbed the Battling Bogarts by the press, their relationship was a volatile mix of passion and dysfunction. Methot, a heavy drinker herself, often clashed with Bogart in alcohol-fueled arguments that sometimes turned physical. One well-known incident involved Methot reportedly stabbing Bogart with a kitchen knife during a particularly heated fight. Despite the toxicity of their relationship, the two stayed together for nearly a decade, bound by a mix of love, dependency, and shared demons. It wasn't until Bogart met Lauren Bacall during the filming of To Have and Have Not, 1944, that his romantic life took a significant turn. Bacall, 25 years his junior, brought a sense of stability and renewal to Bogart's life. Their chemistry was palpable both on and off screen, and their relationship quickly blossomed into one of Hollywood's most iconic love stories. However, even this celebrated romance wasn't without its challenges. Bogart's drinking and occasional temper sometimes strained their marriage, and Bacall, young and ambitious, struggled with the demands of being married to a man who was not only older, but also deeply set in his ways. Still, their love endured, and Bacall remained by Bogart's side until his death in 1957. Bogart's fiery temperament was another hallmark of his personality. He had little patience for incompetence, insincerity, or hypocrisy, and he wasn't afraid to let his frustrations be known. On set, He was both a consummate professional and a man who could be difficult to work with if he felt disrespected or creatively stifled. One of Bogart's most infamous clashes occurred during the filming of The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948. Director John Huston, one of Bogart's closest friends, pushed the actor to his limits, leading to heated arguments over the interpretation of certain scenes. Despite their disagreements, the two men maintained a deep mutual respect, and the film is now regarded as one of Bogart's finest performances. Bogart's rebellious streak also extended to his dealings with studio executives. Unlike many actors of his era who adhered to the rigid control of the studio system, Bogart was unafraid to speak out against unfair treatment. He openly defied Warner Brothers on several occasions, refusing roles he deemed unworthy and advocating for better working conditions. One notable instance of Bogart's defiance came during the making of Conflict, 1945, a film he only agreed to star in under protest. He reportedly clashed with studio head Jack Warner over the film's script, calling it unworthy of my talents. Though Warner ultimately forced Bogart to complete the project, the actor's willingness to stand up for his artistic integrity became a defining aspect of his career. Bogart's temper and uncompromising nature were not without consequences. His clashes with colleagues and superiors sometimes damaged professional relationships, and his bluntness occasionally alienated those who might have otherwise supported him. Yet for Bogart, maintaining his authenticity was non-negotiable, even if it came at a personal or professional cost. Bogart's personal demons, his battle with alcohol, his tumultuous relationships, and his fiery temperament, were undeniably destructive at times. They strained friendships, disrupted his work, and left a trail of emotional scars. Yet these same struggles also fueled his artistry, lending an authenticity to his performances that few actors could match. Humphrey Bogart's career was not only defined by his on-screen roles, but also by his battles with the Hollywood establishment. In an era when studios wielded immense control over their actors, Bogart's defiance of the system earned him a reputation as a maverick. Beyond his professional clashes, his political activism during a turbulent time in American history further cemented his legacy as a man of principles, even when standing up for his beliefs carried significant personal and professional risks. Bogart's relationship with Warner Brothers, the studio that made him a star, was tumultuous at best. Signed to a long-term contract early in his career, he found himself locked into the rigid studio system that dominated Hollywood during the Golden Age. Studios had near total control over their actors, from the roles they played to their public personas, and Warner Brothers was notorious for treating its talent as commodities rather than artists. Bogart's dissatisfaction with the studio system became apparent as he transitioned from minor gangster roles to leading man status. While he appreciated the opportunities Warner Brothers afforded him, he bristled at their heavy-handed tactics. Jack Warner, the studio head, often dictated what films Bogart would appear in, regardless of the actor's opinion of the scripts. Bogart, never one to shy away from confrontation, made his frustrations known. One of Bogart's most publicized disputes with Warner Brothers occurred over the 1945 film Conflict. Bogart felt the film's script was beneath him, dismissing it as hack work. Despite his protests, Warner forced him to honor his contract and star in the movie. While Bogart completed the project, he did so grudgingly, delivering a performance that critics noted lacked his usual intensity. These clashes weren't limited to creative differences. Bogart also pushed back against the studio's financial practices. Actors under contract were paid a fixed salary regardless of a film's success, a model that Bogart believed unfairly benefited the studio at the expense of its talent. He lobbied for higher pay and greater autonomy, setting a precedent for other actors to demand better terms. Bogart's willingness to stand up to Warner Brothers earned him the nickname the Hollywood Rebel. While his defiance sometimes strained his relationship with the studio, It also established him as a trailblazer in the fight for artistic and contractual freedom in Hollywood. Bogart's rebellion against authority wasn't confined to the studio system. It extended to the political sphere as well. In the late 1940s, as the Red Scare gripped America, Hollywood became a focal point for anti-communist sentiment. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, launched investigations into alleged communist influence in the film industry, leading to the blacklisting of numerous actors, writers, and directors. Bogart, a staunch advocate for free speech and civil liberties, became one of the most prominent voices opposing HUAC. In 1947, he joined the Committee for the First Amendment, a group of Hollywood luminaries who protested the committee's tactics. Alongside figures like Lauren Bacall, Katharine Hepburn, and Danny Kaye, Bogart traveled to Washington, D.C. to speak out against what he saw as an unconstitutional assault on freedom of expression. The decision to publicly oppose HUAC was not without risks. The entertainment industry was deeply divided over the issue, with many fearing that any association with the anti-HUAC movement could lead to professional ruin. Bogart himself faced significant backlash. Conservative critics accused him of being a communist sympathizer, and several studio executives warned him that his activism could jeopardize his career. The pressure eventually took its toll. After facing mounting criticism, Bogart issued a public statement distancing himself from the Committee for the First Amendment, claiming that he had been misled about the group's intentions. Privately, however, he remained deeply disillusioned by the witch hunt atmosphere that had engulfed Hollywood. The experience marked a turning point in his relationship with the industry, reinforcing his belief that the system was inherently corrupt and oppressive. And Bogart's battles with Warner Brothers and his stand against HUAC defined him as a man of principles in an industry often characterized by compromise. His defiance wasn't always easy or without consequences. He lost friends, alienated colleagues, and risked his career to stand up for what he believed in. Yet these struggles also solidified his image as more than just a movie star. In an era when many actors conformed to the demands of the studio system and the political establishment, Bogart's willingness to challenge authority set him apart. He wasn't content to play the roles assigned to him, either on screen or in life. Instead, he fought to shape his own narrative, both as an artist and as an individual. This rebellious spirit not only endeared him to audiences, but also paved the way for future generations of actors. Bogart's insistence on artistic freedom helped lay the groundwork for the eventual decline of the studio system in the 1950s and 1960s, ushering in an era where performers had greater control over their careers. Moreover, his political activism, despite its personal cost, underscored the importance of standing up for one's beliefs. In hindsight, Bogart's involvement in the anti-HUAC movement is seen as a courageous stand for civil liberties during one of America's darkest periods. While he may have regretted the fallout at the time, his actions remain a testament to his integrity. Humphrey Bogart's greatest roles are more than just performances. They are windows into his own soul. The characters he portrayed, often morally ambiguous and emotionally layered, carried echoes of his real-life struggles. Through these roles, Bogart channeled his skepticism, volatility, and hidden vulnerability, creating a legacy of unforgettable characters who felt strikingly human. His darkness wasn't merely a narrative device, it was the essence of his art. In John Huston's The Maltese Falcon, 1941, Bogart delivered one of his career-defining performances as Private Detective Sam Spade. Spade was the prototype of the noir anti-hero, cynical, sharp-witted, and morally flexible. The character operates in a world devoid of clear-cut morality, where loyalty is a commodity and trust is a liability. Bogart brought an authenticity to Spade that transcended the script's sharp dialogue. Bogart's personal experiences made him uniquely suited to inhabit Spade's world-weary persona. Raised in a household fraught with emotional neglect and distrust, he had learned early on to rely on himself, developing a skepticism toward authority and human motivations. These traits imbued Spade with a cold pragmatism that felt entirely natural. In moments where Spade exposes the treachery of others, Bogart's expression doesn't betray outrage or surprise. It reveals a man who expects betrayal as a matter of course. Yet beneath Spade's hard-boiled exterior lies a glimmer of principle. By the film's conclusion, he sacrifices a romantic relationship to uphold his own sense of justice, turning Bridget O'Shaughnessy over to the police. The moment is striking because Bogart plays it not as a moral triumph, but as a painful necessity. In Spade, Bogart captured the essence of a man navigating a morally bankrupt world, reflecting his own skepticism about humanity's capacity for good. If Sam Spade introduced audiences to Bogart's stoic cynicism, Rick Blaine in Casablanca, 1942, revealed his emotional depth. Rick is a man hiding a wounded heart behind a carefully constructed mask of indifference. Bogart's portrayal of Rick was a revelation, showcasing his ability to balance toughness with vulnerability. Rick's arc is one of reluctant redemption. When audiences first meet him, he is a detached nightclub owner, famously declaring, "I stick my neck out for nobody." Yet, as the story unfolds, his disillusionment with love and politics gives way to selflessness. Bogart's subtle performance captures this transformation in fleeting, understated moments. His downcast eyes when Ilsa reappears, the bitter edge in his voice as he reminisces about their time in Paris. What makes Rick so compelling is the tension between his exterior and interior worlds. Bogart infused the character with a complexity that felt deeply personal. His own life had been marked by loss and self-protection, and these experiences informed Rick's emotional journey. The climactic scene at the airport, where Rick sacrifices his love for the greater good, is not just a cinematic moment. It's a testament to Bogart's ability to convey profound internal conflict. Rick's nobility feels earned because it is rooted in pain, a pain that Bogart knew all too well. Perhaps no role was as chillingly autobiographical for Bogart as Dixon's Steele in a Lonely Place, 1950. Steele is a gifted but volatile screenwriter whose temper and self-destructive tendencies alienate those around him. The character's unpredictability and inner torment made the performance one of Bogart's most haunting. Directed by Nicholas Ray, In a Lonely Place subverted Bogart's established screen persona. Here, he wasn't the noble anti-hero or the wounded romantic. He was a man on the edge of losing himself. Steele's violent outbursts and brooding melancholy mirrored aspects of Bogart's own personality, particularly his struggles with anger and alcohol. In one unforgettable scene, Steele reenacts a murder scenario for his friends, his intensity blurring the line between performance and genuine menace. Bogart's delivery is so raw, so unsettling, that it's impossible to separate the character from the actor. Critics and contemporaries speculated that Bogart drew heavily from his own emotions to bring Steele to life. The result was a portrayal so visceral that it left audiences questioning whether the darkness they saw on screen was an act or a reflection of Bogart's inner turmoil. Steele's tragic unraveling also spoke to Bogart's fear of alienation. Despite his success, he often felt misunderstood and isolated, much like the character he portrayed. In Steele's moments of vulnerability, his tender but doomed romance with Laurel Gray, played by Gloria Graham, Bogart revealed a fragility that resonated deeply. Bogart's ability to inhabit such dark, complex roles wasn't merely a matter of skill, it was a reflection of his own struggles. His performances often felt like catharsis, a way to channel his inner demons into something creative and meaningful. This interplay between art and life enriched his characters, giving them a timeless quality that continues to captivate audiences. Was this process therapeutic for Bogart, or did it further entrench his struggles? Some argue that acting provided him with a means of expression that was otherwise unavailable to him. On screen, he could confront emotions he rarely showed in private, from vulnerability to righteous anger. His work allowed him to explore parts of himself that were often hidden behind his tough guy exterior. However, there is evidence that this process also took a toll. Bogart's immersion in these roles sometimes mirrored and magnified his personal struggles. His performance in a Lonely Place, for instance, coincided with a turbulent period in his marriage to Lauren Bacall. Friends and colleagues noted that Bogart's mood during the production was darker than usual, as though the line between him and Dixon Steele had blurred. The reason Bogart's performances endure is their authenticity. Unlike many actors of his era, he didn't rely on melodrama or theatrics to convey emotion. Instead, he drew from a well of personal experience, infusing his characters with a realism that felt revolutionary. Whether he was playing a cynical detective, a reluctant hero, or a self-destructive artist, Bogart brought a depth that made his roles resonate across generations. Bogart's darkness wasn't a hindrance. It was his greatest strength. It gave his characters an edge that made them unforgettable and a humanity that made them relatable. His ability to confront his own flaws and channel them into his art remains one of his most enduring legacies. Bogart's shadow wasn't just part of the spotlight, it was the reason he shone so brightly within it. Humphrey Bogart's later years were marked by a bittersweet combination of personal fulfillment and physical decline, a poignant finale to a life lived in the spotlight. Despite his struggles, he found moments of stability and joy, particularly in his marriage to Lauren Bacall, though he remained a man grappling with the inevitable march of time and his own mortality. Bogart's relationship with Lauren Bacall, his co-star in To Have and Have Not, 1944, was a transformative chapter in his life. Their 25-year age difference raised eyebrows in Hollywood, but their chemistry was undeniable, both on-screen and off. Bacall brought a sense of grounding to Bogart's tumultuous existence. Her wit and maturity belied her youth, and she became not only his partner, but also his confidant and anchor. Bacall's influence helped temper some of Bogart's wilder tendencies, including his infamous drinking. While he never entirely gave up alcohol, her presence introduced a measure of moderation. Together, they created a sanctuary in their home, affectionately known as the Bogey and Bacall household, which became a hub for Hollywood's elite. Their marriage also produced 2 children, Stephen and Leslie, whom Bogart adored. Fatherhood gave him a new perspective on life, softening his edges and providing a reprieve from the battles that had defined much of his existence. In Bacall, Bogart found a partner who accepted his flaws while encouraging his better instincts, offering him moments of stability that had long eluded him. As Bogart aged, he faced the dual challenges of declining health and a changing film industry. The rugged leading man who had once commanded the screen began to feel the effects of years of heavy smoking and drinking. His voice, once gravelly with charm, grew hoarser, and his energy waned. Hollywood, too, was undergoing a transformation, with new stars and methods of storytelling emerging in the post-war era. Bogart adapted as best he could, taking on roles that embraced his age and the gravitas it brought. Films like The Caine Mutiny, 1954, showcased a more reflective, nuanced side of his talent, earning him critical acclaim and an Academy Award nomination. However, the relentless pace of his career began to take its toll. By the mid-1950s, he struggled to keep up with the demands of the industry, though his pride never allowed him to admit it publicly. In 1956, Bogart was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, a devastating blow for the man who had built his persona on resilience and grit. The disease progressed rapidly, and Bogart, though initially resistant, eventually underwent surgery and radiation treatments. Despite his declining health, he faced his illness with the same stoicism that had defined both his life and his screen characters. Bacall remained by his side, providing unwavering support during his final months. Friends like Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn visited regularly, and the Hollywood community rallied around him. Bogart, true to form, maintained his sharp wit until the end. When asked how he was feeling, he reportedly quipped, "Pretty good, considering the alternatives." On January 14, 1957, Bogart passed away at the age of 57. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy endured, cemented by the indelible characters he had brought to life and the unapologetically complex man he had been off-screen. Humphrey Bogart's life was a study in contrasts. His on-screen persona as a stoic, principled hero stood in stark relief against the flawed, often tempestuous man he was in real life. Yet, it was this very duality, the interplay of light and shadow, that made him an enduring icon. His struggles with addiction, his battles with the Hollywood establishment, and his fierce commitment to personal integrity were not separate from his greatness. They were an integral part of it. Bogart's cultural impact remains undeniable. Decades after his death, his films continue to captivate audiences, and his complex persona resonates with a modern sensibility that values authenticity. He was not a perfect man, nor did he pretend to be, and it is this raw honesty that has made him timeless. As the closing credits roll on Bogart's life, one might recall a line from Casablanca, spoken by Rick Blaine, but undoubtedly reflective of the man himself. "The problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world, but this is our hill, and these are our beans." In the chiaroscuro of Bogart's legacy, both his shadows and his light shine equally bright, reminding us that greatness often arises not in spite of our imperfections, but because of them. As we wrap up the story of Humphrey Bogart's complex and compelling life, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the interplay between his on-screen roles and his real-life struggles? Did any of these stories surprise you? Share your insights, opinions, or favorite Bogart moments in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Beyond the Fame, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story about the legends of cinema. There's so much more to uncover about the stars who defined Hollywood, and we'd love to have you along for the journey.